And Naomi is going to pick up around the issue of providing that person-centered support when working with someone with a hoarding tendency. So Naomi, welcome, and over to you.
Hi Dave, thank you. Hi everybody. Thanks for inviting me, well us, We Care Home Improvements, to give a presentation today. So I'll give you a little bit of background about the us, that'd be great. So we're made up of a team, like Dave said, of employed staff and volunteers. Now, originally, going back quite a long time ago, it was one kind of project manager, I suppose, and a team of volunteers. This has expanded to which we now have 3 employed staff. We're all part-time, and we've got a number of volunteers. And what that enables us to do is go from a previous way of working where it was mainly volunteer based, and we were working with lower level clients, almost on a preventative scale. And what that meant was that we weren't really able to work with clients who were at a higher risk. Where we're at now is that we've got more paid staff, and what that means is that we're able to go into properties where the risks are higher, the risks of trips and falls are higher for us and also the clients. And we work in pairs sometimes, so that, you know, just practically when you're in an environment where there's quite a high clutter and we're not necessarily standing on the floor, we're able to support each other physically, but also emotionally, and that's really important for us as well. And as Dave mentioned, I'm currently volunteer kind of coordinator, so I look after the volunteers. I'm starting to move away from that role. We're going to get a person specifically to do that, so then I'm able to work with more clients. But our volunteers are integral to the part of the service that we offer, because it means that we can offer more long-term support to the clients. And as it's been mentioned, it's that when those items are removed, it's really hard for them to let go. And so having almost volunteers as almost like a transitional object in a way, from living in a home that they are so surrounded by all of their items, into living in a way that's seen as more kind of normal. And those are our volunteers, and that's what they do. They offer quite a lot of emotional support to them, as well as taking away their items. Thanks. So yeah, the expectations of our funders. So as I said, that the project originally started many moons ago in 2014, and we have gone from working within Bristol, working in Bath and North East Somerset and South Gloucestershire. It kind of shrunk back down in 2019 just to Bristol area, and we've recently been awarded some money back from Bath and North East Somerset, so we're starting to work there again, which is great. And the funding that we've got from Bristol takes us up to 2023. We have funding to see 20 clients a year in both Bristol and Bath, which is great. We've got additional money to see another 15 clients, focusing on homeowners in Bristol. We can see people from any tenure. There's no kind of limits really, so it's good to be able to extend past the Bristol area to work into Bath. And our aim is really to reduce the amount of items that they've got in their home, to increase access in and out of the home from a safety point of view, so that we can avoid enforcement, eviction, forced clearances that can happen that are so detrimental to these people's well-being, reduce the use of other health and social care services and improve the safety. And through doing this, what we aim to do is, what we hope to do is to improve their quality of life and their ability to independently manage their hoarding tendencies, also to increase their confidence in managing their lives as a whole, reduce social isolation, and also increase their well-being physically, emotionally, mentally. So yes, that's what we offer. That's what we hope to achieve. But the expectations of the referrers are quite different from what we can do. If you can tap on, please, Dan. Because they expect miracles. We completely understand that when quite often referrals come through from social services and housing officers, that people can be quite shocked at the way in which people are living. And to achieve this, there are lots of things that we do and don't do. So I'm going to run through some of the, I think the don'ts first. I can't remember what comes first. Do's. So this is one where you have to, brilliant, thank you. So what we try and do, well, initially, before we do anything within the home, what we do is spend a lot of time building up a relationship with these clients, so that we can do the practical sides of things. So we do try to find useful places to take the clutter, so removing it from the home. Now, this is the really tricky bit, is removing it. But what we do is discuss with the client where they'd like it to go. Quite often people are happy if it's going to be used by somebody else, because they hold quite a lot of value in items that they have around the house, even if they may be broken or seem useless to you or I. And we're trying to encourage people to use support groups if there's any available. And also it's really important to ask them how we can help them, because quite often our ideas of helping aren't aligned with their ideas. And then we praise them for the work that they've completed. It doesn't matter how big or how small, whether we've cleared, you know, a 6-inch square off of the side of the dining room table, or whether we've kind of cleared the whole floor space. It doesn't matter how big or small it is. But having small goals is really, really important, because anything bigger could be really overwhelming. And what we encourage our volunteers and each other to do are to share ideas with each other, because quite often we can have similar experiences, but we get stuck sometimes. We also encourage each other to tell each other how we feel. So this is part of my role within the volunteer coordinating, is to support the volunteers emotionally, because it can be quite overwhelming. And we always give a time period of no more than 2 hours, because it is emotionally and physically draining for both the client and the volunteer or paid staff. And yeah, again, we celebrate all the cleared space. And we also establish kind of like a red route or no parking areas. So if we've managed to clear a space going, you know, to an exit or entry point, that's a definite, like, we do not put anything there. No parking areas are spaces, again, where we just, you know, because we've celebrated that cleared space, we're not going to go back. And this is the one of the not the hardest things, but the thing that takes sometimes the longest time, is establishing that rapport and trust, because a lot of clients have been let down in the past. They've been let down by statutory services, by people promising things and not delivering, or people expecting too much of them. So we really want to make sure that that relationship is there. We always mirror their language. If they use the word clutter, we use clutter. If they use belongings, things, treasures, again, we're not putting our ideas onto them. We're always discreet. Quite often neighbours already know, but sometimes they don't. We're always guided by the person that we're helping, but we also have to be very mindful of any health and safety issues that need to be addressed first, like clearing routes to and from kind of exits, entrances. We always ask the person if we can touch the items. Once we get to know somebody, sometimes people will be very happy for us to not continue asking, or to agree. We agree certain things that are okay to be touched and things that aren't okay to be touched. And during a session, we need to kind of steer the client to remain focused, because it's quite easy to get sucked into an item and all of its history. And it's really important to show the client that we value their items, but also to not get too distracted. And we do make sure we have short breaks. You know, if it's just to have a glass of water or something, because again, it can be very overwhelming. And we take time. We take lots of time. We talk things through so that we can figure out what we're going to do next. And the don'ts. We never call a hoarder unless they call themselves a hoarder. And even then, even if they feel it's okay to call themselves a hoarder, I still personally find it can be quite derogatory term to use. We tend to use the term hoarding tendencies. Not many people get diagnosed with hoarding disorder. And then also we don't have a van. It would be great if we had a van, but we wouldn't turn up in kind of sign written vehicles. Some clients I've got don't like me to wear my lanyard, my ID, so I kind of tuck it, under, or keep it in my bag, again because of that privacy side of other people knowing what's going on. And we don't suggest to have car boot sales. Sometimes clients offer, and that's fine, but we wouldn't suggest that, because it's almost a way of devaluing their items. And if the person that we're helping is not in the mood for sorting, we don't force it. We don't. If it gets to that point, then we know that we need to stop. When we set time scales, like I said, we don't work for longer than 2 hours in a block, but also setting time scales of what do we want to achieve within 6 sessions, for example, and just try and gauge with the client what is possible in that time. Okay. And we don't take control for them. It's all person-centered, it's client-led. We can make gentle suggestions once we've built up that rapport with the client. And we make sure that we don't focus on the whole house, because that's completely unachievable. And we always say to each other that we're not on our own, and also the client's not on their own either. Yeah, saying things that I've seen so much worse and things like that isn't encouraging necessarily to the client. I've got a client who thinks that it's the worst thing I've ever seen, but it definitely isn't. But saying that doesn't actually help him at all. And we never try to do too much at once, similar to not tackling the whole house. We don't use judgmental language. We might think it, but it's really important to not say it. We're not using negative language and devaluing the suggestions. We're never suggesting to have a clear out. The same with suggesting to do a car boot sale. Again, it's devaluing their belongings. or randomly suggesting items for removal, as if we know what is valuable and what is not. We don't suggest getting rid of all their rubbish. Sometimes it almost seems like a quick fix to go, oh, that's all recycling, we can get rid of that. It doesn't work. And we definitely don't ignore the health hazards. Sometimes it's hard for the clients to see it, but we can't ignore it. So the expectations of the clients vary quite a lot. Their perception sometimes of us is that we are like everybody else that they've met, that we are going to suggest to take everything away, to suggest to remove all the rubbish, to suggest to get a skip. And we never do that. They almost expect to be disrespected, because that's often how they've been treated by other professionals that have come in with shock horror on their face, going, this is disgusting, the way you're living is awful. But once they get to know who we are and the way we work, that soon diminishes. But they obviously have a different priorities. You know, for us it's safety versus not for them, rather it's what would be nice to do and what's easy for them. It is important to concentrate on easier items first, but also with that safety in mind. And sometimes they ask us to clean and we're not there to clean. Sometimes we do, but that isn't our aim. And also they don't often see the risk of pests either, that they get used to seeing or hearing, you know, mice maybe living in there with them. But it's a big no-no to us. And friends and family can also have similar expectations to referrers, that we're going to snap our fingers and Mary Poppins are magic in there, and it's difficult to manage other people's expectations. Okay. So some of our experiences, other, you know, with frustrations, it sounds awful, but it can be often with referrers that they expect a lot too soon, and that once a referral is made, they don't often make contact with us, or they kind of close the case. And something that was brought up through the report is that actually that that team approach, I think it was the team around the people, or team around the person approach, is what is really valuable, so that we can share kind of experiences with each other, what works and what doesn't. And the best practice is to work collaboratively, and the best experiences I've had is when there is a team around people. The happy side is when clients get mental health support. As much as we try to give them that support, emotional support, we're not, and myself, I'm a qualified counsellor, so I have that background in mental health and being able to offer them that type of support, but that's not what I'm there, that's not my primary role. So when they do get a mental health support, it really does kind of help to break down all of the reasons why they have hoarding tendencies, because quite often there's a lot of trauma that is behind the reason why they're hoarding. And when they don't get the support, and when we've tried to work too fast and there's been a lot of push from other agencies, and that's quite often when people relapse and they shut their doors, and then they end up coming back round again. Okay. So just a couple of kind of case studies, really. This lady, I'll call her Jane. She lives in a kind of not even a one bed, it's living room, kitchen downstairs, and then you go up some steps and then there's a mezzanine level where she sleeps. She's agoraphobic, claustrophobic, bipolar, among many other kind of conditions. And she was ordering a lot of food from kind of these Deliveroo, Uber Eats type of places, and this was all piled up at the end of her bed. So myself and my colleague went in, and she was happy for us to remove all of the rubbish, to take all of the kind of recyclable items away. And we did that within a couple of hours, and it seemed quite successful. If we go to the next slide, we'll see the after, which looked great. We got the Henry Hoover up there and gave it a good hoover up. But this was easy, and she relapsed. It was too quick. It was too much too soon. And what's happened over the following couple of years is that actually she's got mental health support. She's been able to tackle her agoraphobia, and the picture here doesn't do it justice. There's none of that at the top. I think she's kept her globe and a little fan, but it's not cluttered at all anymore, and that's because she's had a whole team helping her. Okay. This lady, I'll call her Mary. Now, the before and after are the wrong way around, I think, here, but when we first went in to her, you couldn't see the floor at all, and she's very immobile. She uses a stick and also the support of the items around her home to move around. Now, we were able to create paths and make it safer for her to move around. But she ended up disengaging. It was starting to get to a point where we were explaining that actually to make any more movement in the home, we need to start actually making decisions about keeping or not keeping items, and that was too hard for her. And she got quite upset. We offered to go in more slowly, but it wouldn't work. We could only do as much as we could, which was to make pathways just in case of a fire. Okay. So this is another lady that we've worked with who, these pictures aren't of the same room. On the right, we've got the kitchen, and over a period of about a month, so probably about 4 sessions, my colleague was able to help clear the side so that she could actually be able to prepare and cook herself food. And on the left hand side, we've got a lot of her craft items that were piled up, and she loves to be able to make things and mend things. She's incredibly talented. But again, it was a lady who, once we kind of organized a little bit, once we needed to start getting into the real kind of nitty-gritty of things, she disengaged, which was quite sad. Okay. So that is all I have to share with you today. I feel like I've spoken very, very fast. But yeah, are there questions in the chat or?
Naomi, can I just pick up one point which actually you mentioned, which was reflected in Norbert's report as well to some extent, which was the fact that We Care is obviously a third sector organisation. And I think you mentioned that some of the people that you end up working with are people who have lost trust in the statutory sector, lost trust in other organisations. I'm just wondering if you could comment on how you see it as the value of a service like this being provided by a third sector provider rather than coming from the statutory sector.
Yeah, I'm wondering whether it is that definition between kind of third sector or whether it's just the approach of the person, because actually I could be employed by the council but still have the same approach.
Okay.
I think quite often it's the approach of the person and the type of the job that they have that kind of limits maybe their ability to work slowly, and we have that ability to take it slow and steady. yeah, I don't know if that quite answers your question.
Yeah, no, so it's interesting that it's a question of the ethos of the service, how it's delivered, and the relationship which the member of staff develops with the person with a hoarding tendency, which is the critical thing, rather than the nature of their employer, if you like. Because sometimes people will say, well, you know, if it's a local authority service, it's not going to work. But actually, what you're saying is the issue is not necessarily what sector it is, but how the service is delivered, and the training and approach of the people delivering the service.
Yeah, definitely. The training is quite important, I think, so you know, all the pressures that they do feel from their roles, it may be that they'd be able to deliver what they need to differently if they know more about the condition.
And Helen has also mentioned in the chat box the issue that when you're working in the council or in the statutory sector, there's a pressure to deliver, to deal with the client, resolve the issue and move on, because you're always going to be under pressure to kind of have that throughput of cases, to be able to open cases, deal with them and close cases. And I suppose if you, as Helen's saying, if you're working for the council, then if the hoarding issue has created problems for neighbours, and there's a councillor involved or neighbours are involved, then that can put more pressure on the service to actually achieve an outcome, and doesn't allow that time for the building of the relationships, which you said is again such an important part of an approach to dealing or working with people with a hoarding tendency.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's when the whole kind of team approach is really useful, because when we've had when we often feel the pressures from people who've referred, and actually being able to take that time with them to speak with them, whether it's a referral from a member of the family or something that sees it as urgent, being able to actually have that conversation with them to explain things a lot more clearer sometimes alleviates that pressure just through having a conversation.